And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to our Networking for Introverts workshop. Excited to present to you all today. My name is Stephanie Galindo. I'm one of the senior career advisors at the Career Center. And I am also a fellow introvert. And with today's workshop, our goal is to help you understand what it means to be an introvert, and then hopefully use or gain some tips and tricks you can utilize when in various networking scenarios. So before we get started, just know there is a live transcript option if you need it. And then, as I mentioned, again, we will be recording this session, which you can definitely access after today's workshop. And just a quick overview of today's agenda, as I mentioned, understanding introverts, doing a quick overview of what networking is, tips for effective networking, the elevator pitch, and hopefully at the end, if any of you have some Q&A. Now, before we get started, I was hoping to hear from some of you. And hopefully some of you are open to share. What comes to mind when you hear the word introvert? Not sure how familiar you are with Zoom. A lot of you are experts at this point. There should be an annotate option at the top of your screen where you can choose a text and type in anything that comes to mind when you hear the word introvert. I'll also encourage you, if you want to type in the chat. If you don't want to do annotation, what comes to mind for you all when you hear the word introvert? Anyone? Anyone brave enough to type anything out? I see reserved, shy, low social battery, conserved energy in group settings, socially anxious, keeps to themselves. I'm seeing getting energy from being alone rather from others, someone who draws energy from within themselves, someone who doesn't enjoy social events, quiet, don't know how to open a conversation, feels most at home with themselves, observant. A lot of great comments. Holds back on sharing personal things, likes to be alone, feel more comfortable. Thoughtful. Feeling overwhelmed in social settings. I totally get that. And so for some of the introverts in here, I'm thinking you might be able to relate to some of these things. These are definitely things I can relate to myself, but I thought it might be helpful for us to kind of share, some of these ideas. And a lot of it really resonated for me. For those who aren't introverts, hopefully you get a better idea of some of the things that we hear as introverts. Go to the next slide for you all, but thank you for sharing. And a lot of you really mentioned some of these things. As an introvert or extrovert, the main difference in these two terms is how we interact with the world and how we direct our energy. And it was good to see a lot of people really recognized that as introverts, we get our energy in different places. So I thought it'd be helpful to kind of compare the two. So I know I saw a lot of things where it said introvert is shy. So that's not necessarily the case. There are also a lot of misconceptions people have about either being an introvert or extrovert. But for me, I think the best way to think about it is, again, how we interact with the world and how we are energized. So if we think about extroverts, they're really energized by being with others. They like being in social situations, and they get that energy from people. For introverts, we're energized by spending time alone. This doesn't mean we don't like socializing. We could like socializing, but by the end of the day, it drains our batteries and we need that alone time to kind of recharge. Whereas extroverts, their batteries are charged by those people interactions. Other ways we interact, extroverts tend to think out loud. So, if they're talking a lot, they're externally thinking things out. Whereas introverts, a lot of it is internal. We're thinking things through in our heads. So there's a lot of stuff going on in our heads. Extroverts talk more than listen. They tend to. Introverts listen more than talk. Extroverts have a lot of enthusiasm. So when they communicate, there's a lot of energy, a lot of high energy. With introverts, we tend to keep our enthusiasm to ourselves. So if I say I'm really happy right now and I say it very calmly, it maybe doesn't seem like it, but inside I'm really happy. Extroverts respond quickly, and then introverts take a lot of time to think before they respond. And then finally, extroverts, they prefer breadth to depth, while introverts prefer depth to breadth. And so hopefully this will give you an idea of those differences. Maybe some of this resonated with you. I do want to point out though, these are all preferences. One is not better than the other. It's just how we get energy and how we interact with others. I'm going to give you a quick example. So, as I mentioned, I'm an introvert. So I had to go to a social event with my husband, who's an extrovert. So we get to the social event, I'm feeling kind of nervous in general, just going to this. So we get there, and then I happen to meet one person that I really connected to and enjoyed having that conversation. So the entire social event, I spoke to that one person. Meanwhile, my husband, he kind of made his rounds. So he talked to so many different people throughout the event that I didn't even see him. So for me, it kind of demonstrated the different ways we navigate social situations. I don't think one is better than the other, but he loved it. He loved the opportunity to meet different people, talk to different people. And then I had the best time connecting and meeting one person. So that's just another way that we can kind of look at how extroverts and introverts work in social situations. But with today's focus on introverts, I also thought it was important to recognize all the strengths you have as an introvert. So one thing we noted, we're really good listeners, right? We have a lot of great active listening skills. People honestly like to be listened to. It shows that you're engaged, and a lot of that can be through nodding, small interjections, eye contact. You don't have to have a very long response, but if you're showing you're actively listening, people really feel heard. So that's a strength that you bring to networking. Another thing is, people say introverts are shy, they don't like social situations, they don't talk as much, but introverts they can be great public speakers, can be great conversationalists, especially in topics they care deeply about. So you yourself as an introvert, think about something you're passionate about and the conversations that you can carry on for hours, right? So we're definitely able to have those conversations. Introverts also think before they speak. And so all our responses are typically very thoughtful, and then we're focused on meaningful connections. And, that is the heart of networking, that we build those connections. And I think as an introvert, we can use that strength in the way that we network. I thought I'd share this quote, and I hope this is something that you can take away from today's workshop. The trick for introverts is to honor their styles instead of allowing themselves to be swept up by prevailing norms. And this is by Susan Cain. If you have not read her work or seen her TED Talk. She's the author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. So she just talks about how Western culture misunderstands or undervalues the strengths and the capabilities of introverts. So it's a really good read, as well as TED Talk. But the whole point I wanted to make is that, you know, extroverts have one way of networking and building their network, which is great. You know, I love the enthusiasm, their ability to meet people, the seamless way they can carry on discussions. But I also want you to recognize, as introverts, there's a lot of things that we bring to the table as well that kind of respects who you are as a person. So you as introverts can also be able to network effectively, and hopefully today you kind of get some ideas on how to do that. So we're going to delve right into some of this stuff. So networking 101. You know, everyone hears the buzzword, you should be networking. What is that? I'm sure a lot of you are in here because you're nervous at the whole thought of networking. But if we officially define networking, it's the exchange of information or services among individual groups or institutions. And hopefully you can cultivate productive relationships through those networking opportunities. But there's lots of benefits to it, right? And I want you to think about, what is your reason for networking? And it could be multiple things. Is it to gain advice on a potential industry? Do you want to learn knowledge about your field? Do you want to expand your professional network, conduct informational interviews, access to alumni mentorship, or potential contacts to get interviews? So one thing to know about networking is that the majority of hires occur through personal contacts. So if I were to ask everyone in this room, how many of you have gotten a job through someone you know, a lot of you might raise your hand. And so that is just a snapshot of the power of networking. And so this is how networking can be beneficial to you. Again, there's the whole learning aspect. And then the other side of things is ultimately get a job. And I'm sure many of you want that once you graduate from USC. So hopefully we can talk about those ways you can do that. So with networking, where might you network? Does anyone want to share either out loud, in the chat? What are some ideas of where you could potentially network? Career fairs, class, LinkedIn, campus events, definitely. USC clubs. So yes, I agree with all of those things. Joining an org. I know networking sounds scary to some, but I would think about smaller scale as well, right? Your network could be as simple as thinking about who's in your existing network. Could that be, you know, a family? Could it be a friend? Could it be, you know, a classmate, your neighbor, a previous supervisor? So all of these are your networks. So you can always start small. The other avenues, a lot of what everyone is saying, there's the virtual way of networking. There's also, you know, thankfully we have in-person events now. And so a couple ideas where you can start thinking about networking. The first one I'll talk about is the Trojan Network. I would say this is the best way to get started if you want to get your feet wet. You can access this through the Career Center website, but the Trojan Network is our version of LinkedIn. Basically, it's a platform where alumni sign up because they want to mentor and guide students. And so This gives you the opportunity to reach out to alumni, ask them questions about their industry, set up an informational interview. We'll talk about more in detail, how you can network to them, but I would highly recommend using the Trojan Network to start. Not only that, they know to expect a response from you, right? They're there because they want to help you. Obviously, LinkedIn is a great resource as well. There are, I think last time I checked, over 300,000 alumni, USC alumni on LinkedIn. Many of you shared a lot of our career events. So we have our career fair September 15th. Hopefully today can prepare you so you can share your elevator pitch the day of career fair. Another thing we offer are Trojan chat or Trojan talks or coffee chats with employers. That's another great way to meet with people in industries you're interested in or recruiters. And then one thing that we have coming up is a mock interview night with USC alumni. This is September 13th. So that's in a couple days. It's all virtual. This is a very non-intimidating way to practice what you learned today. And so you're able to do a mock interview night with an alum. So in one way you're practicing, in another way you're actually networking with an alumni. So there's multiple ways you can connect with others, but again, you don't have to do anything major. It doesn't have to be, you go to this large 1,000 person networking event. It could just start with meeting with your faculty during office hours. So definitely start small. And then I want to thank Ella. She's one of our grad interns in the office. She's sharing some links for you all so you can access a lot of these services and programs. Okay, so now that you know what networking is, where you can network, we want to start thinking of all those tips we can start using when we want to start this process. So I think the first thing is think about your reason for networking. We provided a framework of how to make goals that are achievable. But again, there's a different way or reason that people want to network. Examples of those goals, and I mentioned these earlier, is it for career exploration? Sometimes I see students where they're deciding between two majors or deciding between two industries. Networking might be a good way to talk to different professionals to learn, what is it like working in this field versus, finding out someone else working in a different field. So that could be your goal. Another one is maybe you would like a mentor to help you throughout your professional career. Especially if, you don't know what to expect after graduation or throughout your time in college. And then one of the primary goals a lot of students use networking for is to find a job or internship opportunity. I think there's a way to strategically do that. And so we'll talk about some of those ways. But your strategy will definitely depend on your goal. The next thing I wanted to share is you want to know yourself. So as an introvert, like I said, maybe a smaller setting will be more comfortable with you. I know when I first started working at USC, our division would have a lot of social events, so we could get to know other colleagues, right? So it was a little intimidating for me, but what would help is, well, first kind of pushing myself out of my comfort zone to get to know other people. And then the other thing, bring a friend. So I would go with a colleague who would introduce me to other people in other departments. And so that made it easier and less intimidating. So it's okay to bring a classmate, a friend. You don't have to go by yourself. And then, like I said, start small. The other thing is to know when you're at your best, right? So if you are not a morning person, then it's probably a bad idea to go to a coffee chat at 8 in the morning, right? Or let's say you have a full day of classes, work where you're, interacting with people back to back, then scheduling that informational interview at 6 p.m. is probably not the best idea because you need to recharge your batteries. So in that case, maybe you take a break and then you schedule it later on that day, or maybe during a day where you don't have so much social interaction. So really know when you're at your best. And so that will become apparent when you start interacting and networking with others. And then weigh the benefits of a networking opportunity. You don't have to go to every single thing that's happening, right? Maybe you realize I only want to do small interactions. So I'm going to go to coffee chats and focus my efforts there where I can more likely get a one-on-one interaction versus a larger event where I'm less likely to make a personal connection with someone. So yeah, definitely think about if that networking opportunity is aligned with, what you're comfortable with. But I am going to emphasize, slowly try to step out of your comfort zone. And I think that's one of the ways you can become more comfortable in these situations. The other thing for me is planning ahead, right? You're going into a networking opportunity or you're meeting with someone one-on-one, you want to be prepared. So a lot of that could be coming up with sample questions, topics that you already know you want to bring up, reading the news for the day. So there's, a topic that comes to mind. And so I think it's always good to prepare. I will share some sample questions as well to give you an idea. And then also practicing your introduction and elevator pitch. And we'll talk about that more in detail as well. So hopefully if there's one thing, okay, another thing you can get out of today is knowing an easy way to introduce yourself. And then you just got to keep practicing over and over until it's easy. And then research the person or the organizations you may be meeting. So if you have a coffee chat or an informational interview, look them up on LinkedIn, kind of see what activities, where have they worked? Or if you're meeting an employer at the career fair, make sure you research them ahead of time. It not only shows that, you're really committed to getting to know them, but it also provides some comfort knowing for you to know what to expect. Like you already know who the person is, what they're all about, with their background. And so I think it's just helpful to make sure you do all the preparation ahead of time. Now, I was hoping we could just go down to some of the basics for Conversation 101. Small talk. Introverts typically don't like small talk, and I can say that because I'm an introvert. Some of you might, but it's not our favorite thing in the world. But I'm going to say it's still an important skill that you should have, right? Once you start, your first job, or, you come into an interview, you meet a recruiter. There are opportunities where you will have to engage in small talk. So some simple questions you can ask. How's your day going so far? How did you join the organization? What projects are you working on right now? Can you tell me about your background and how you came to work for blank? So these are just some simple questions you can ask. So for today's challenge, I'm gonna ask each of you to strike up a conversation with someone you typically would not. So maybe it's that classmate you sit next to every single day. I think we're in week 4. Maybe this is the day you ask them how their day is going so far. The more you do it, the easier it will be. My go-to question every time I meet with a student, how's your semester going so far? It makes it easier for me to open up the discussion and also gauge where they are. So they'll tell me they're having a great semester, or maybe it's not. And so that kind of opens up the discussion and makes it comfortable for both of us. The other way to strike up conversation is with more open-ended questions. These are more structured. The method that I will talk about in the next slide is the Tiara method, which was created by Steve Dalton, but it kind of provides more of a structured way of how to ask questions while networking. He worked with MBA students at Duke University and wrote the book, The 2-Hour Job Search. And so the idea is you start with questions that kind of treat the person you're talking to as the expert. And then the questions become more specific in that you're asking for advice. You treat them more as a mentor or a coach, where hopefully towards the end of it, they become an advocate for you. So I'll talk about what that means in the next slide. And then at the end of any conversation, right? Practicing how to close the conversation. It was great meeting you today. You want to thank them. What are next steps, right? I'll be sure to follow up and find that book that you were talking about. Or, it'd be great if we can keep in touch. Can I add you on LinkedIn? Or do you mind if I get your business card so I can share with you, updates about how classes are going? So always think about how you can close, and if you want to maintain that connection with them, how you will do that. So with the Tiara method that I mentioned, I kind of broke it down, or based on the method, into all the different sections. You can always take a picture of this if you want sample questions to use in the future. But first, when we start with the first part of it, trends. So these are very general, open-ended questions that you can start with. What are trends that are most impacting your organization right now? Or how has your industry changed? So you're treating them, you're the expert of this field. What are you seeing? What are some insights you have? So you're kind of moving towards getting to know them more and learning more about the industry. What's the best lesson you learned on the job? Then you're seeking more advice. What can I be doing right now to prepare myself for a career? Or what advice do you have for me as a student? And then, typically, right, when you have someone that can serve as a mentor or support, what resources should I be sure to look into next? What next steps would you recommend for someone in my situation? And then finally, assignments. Have you had interns or new grads in the past? If so, what sort of projects have they worked on? Have any projects increased in popularity? I like this question because now it opens up an opportunity for you. Let's say they give you an answer to this question. This is your chance to say, well, actually, I worked on a similar project through my last internship, or I'm currently learning about this in my class. And so you're kind of planting the seed that, this could be a potential opportunity for an internship or a job in the future if they do hire new grads or interns. This is definitely one way to do it. You don't have to follow this model. It's just a way to think about what are some questions you can ask, especially if your goal is to ultimately land a job or internship. I think there's also, I don't talk about this much in any of the slides, but gauging the reaction of the other person you're talking to. Are they receptive? Because I think the other side of things is maybe they don't want to engage in a conversation, or maybe they never respond to your LinkedIn, and that's okay too. So I think that's also something that's realistic and you should keep in mind. But in this case, these are just some questions you can think about as you engage through some of your networking opportunities. And then if you're interested in learning more, feel free to find the book, and then you can let me know how that read was. Okay, tip number 4. So this kind of puts the ball in your court where you are initiating contact. I really like that a lot of things are virtual. You know, I purposely made this workshop virtual so that it was comfortable. You didn't need to go to a physical place with lots of people, you know, and it makes it easier to interact sometimes. I wouldn't say you should primarily rely on virtual ways to network, but it's one way. And if it's the one way that can help you get more comfortable, maybe start with a virtual message through LinkedIn, email, Trojan Network. And that's where you would explain who you are, why you're interested in their organization or reaching out to them. And then what are next steps? Why are you reaching out to that person? Do you want to set up a coffee chat or a Zoom chat? And then close your email. And we can definitely help you at the Career Center if you have questions about that. The next part of it is the whole in-person aspect. And this is where the elevator pitch comes in. So the idea with the elevator pitch is, let's say you get on an elevator and the CEO of your dream company steps into the elevator. This is your brief window to really share who you are before they get off on the next floor. So it's a brief introduction of all the highlights that you have. And so it should include your name, major, interests, inquiry. One way to think about it is you could share your past experience, what your present experience is, and then what your future goals. And then always think about the nonverbal communication. I personally have practiced in the mirror or, you know, with another person. How do you look like when you share your elevator pitch? So eye contact, thinking about your fillers, smiling, being professional. Some examples, if you want to take a look, there's just basic icebreaker greeting. You know, my question, how's your semester going so far, right? You can ask something similar. There's more of an introduction where you provide a little bit more detail about what you're majoring in and what kind of internship you're looking for. And then the third one is more of an inquiry, where you're asking more of the questions of, you know, an internship we saw or what they look for in candidates. But I really want to focus on phase 2, introduction. This can be used in multiple settings. You can use this introduction at the upcoming career fair, at the mock interview night. As you go on to interviews, there will always be some form of a question about, tell me about yourself. And so this is where your introduction comes in. So it's really useful to have a way of communicating this. And so I kind of broke it down into, you know, more of a structured format. It doesn't have to be this way. Feel free to take a photo if you want to remember this structure, but you want to start with your introduction. Name, major, school. I also added, you know, is there anything that differentiates you from another candidate? One thing about you saying you're from USC, you meet another Trojan and there's that instant connection. Is there anything else that you can use to connect you to another person? Are you a student athlete? Are you a veteran? Are you from a hometown that's very small? I'll give you an example. This just happened yesterday. I went to a very small high school. My graduating class was about 150 students. But I happened to meet someone at a social event who went to the same high school as me. And so there was that instant connection, knowing we had that similarity. So if there's something unique about you, you can always add that to your pitch. Another thing you want to add, right? What's your experience? Like, have you volunteered somewhere? Are you part of a student org that you're passionate about? Do you have any internships that really stand out as it relates to the positions, internships, or industries you're interested in? And then what are your goals? And then finally, I mentioned this a couple times, what's the purpose of your pitch? And it doesn't have to be anything extensive. It could be because you want to learn more about something, gain insight. You have interest in a job, that's coming out of career fair. Or maybe you just want to make a connection because you really want to get to know them further. And so what I'm going to ask you all today is take 1 minute or 2 minutes to craft your pitch right now. And so you have this moving forward. You kind of have a pitch that you can start working on and crafting so that by next week, when all of you attend the career fair or mock interview night, you have your introduction. So I'll give you all a couple minutes to think about that. I know we have one question in the chat. Should we have business cards at this stage, or does a resume suffice? I think business cards are always handy. You never know when you might encounter someone that you want to connect to. I've been in situations where I'm like, man, I wish I had my business card. Of course, I forgot it. But it's always good to have that on hand. Like I said, you meet your dream CEO in the elevator. I mean, you're not going to be carrying your resume around, but maybe you have a professional business business card in your wallet. So I think it's always good to have business cards. For career fair, we do recommend copies of your resume. So the next thing I'm going to ask, and I'm sure you knew this was inevitable, does anyone want to share their pitch out loud to the group? Anyone brave enough to share their elevator pitch with us? I will tell you, last semester I did this workshop and I did breakout rooms and everyone left after that. So I'm not doing this time. So maybe all of you can appreciate. Claudia, do you mind unmuting yourself and sharing? Thanks for being the brave one here.
Hi, yeah, sure. I'll even pop my video on for a second to really overdo it. I didn't write it down because I was listening to what you were saying, but so hello, my name is Claudia Galliani and I'm completing a master's in public policy degree at USC. I'm also pursuing certificates in social justice and public policy, public financial management. I've been involved in various anti-racism clubs and other things throughout my college journey, and I've developed skills in data analysis and research. I've also had an internship position as an associate intern with United Way, where I worked for the Youth Violence Prevention Network in my senior year of undergrad that I really enjoyed. I'm interested in a career in anti-discrimination policy and any kind of public policy in the field of public policy. Could you please tell me more about your position in this organization?
I feel like you've done this before, Claudia.
Oh, thanks.
It's so natural for you. Thank you. Good job. And I know you were put on the spot, but you were just reading along and it came out seamlessly. You don't have to follow this format. but I think it's a good way to start. Your pitch will always depend on what you're applying for, who you're networking with, so that can always be adjusted, but I think you did an amazing job. So thank you, Claudia. So I want to be mindful of time. I will not ask for anyone to volunteer, so everyone can still hang on and not leave. But yes, next challenge. So the first challenge was small talk, maybe ask a question. Second challenge today, craft your pitch and possibly share with someone and see how that goes. And then, so we're kind of winding down on our tips, right? We talked about strategies on how to craft your pitch, different ways to network, example questions. It's an ongoing process, right? So you just don't want to exchange business cards and then send an email, and then that's the end of it. So you want to be available, you want to stay connected to the person. Sometimes they won't respond. That's okay. I usually tell students give it 2 weeks and then send a follow-up email. Some networking connections will fizzle off. Maybe it just wasn't the type of connection that was in your cards. Totally fine. But maybe there are other ways to nourish those connections you want to continue. So like the part 2 of it, right? Let's say it's a couple months in, there hasn't been a lot of activity. You can share updates about maybe a project you worked on, or if there were any milestones that you discussed. Share any relevant articles to show you're up to date on the industry, and maybe that's something they'd be interested in. Or, you know, maybe you can follow up with something you learned or are learning and get their thoughts on that. So there's a lot of different ways you want to nourish your connections with them, and know it's a two-way street, right? You want to make sure that you know how to give and take, and try to continue to develop those interactions. So it's not all about you getting everything from them. You also want to be there to, you know, provide your insight, your support. And so hopefully networking, the goal is that it should be mutually beneficial. So also ask them how you can help. I know we're running out of time, but I really would like to play this video for you all. This is the last tip, and I'm going to play it. It's only a couple minutes. I know we're running out of time, so if you need to leave, understandable, but I'll go ahead and play the video.
There's an idea called free trait theory, and it comes from a fantastic personality psychologist named Brian Little. Professor Little is a very strong introvert. He's also a world-class public speaker. He is one of the best public speakers you will ever see. And when he's on stage, you would have no idea that he's an introvert. And he does it because he cares so much about the ideas that he wants to convey and about his audiences that he's just giving every drop of himself. But when he gets off that stage, he is utterly drained and doesn't want to do the small talk. So he kind of jokes around about it, but it's true. He will always race off to the nearest restroom where he can hide and be by himself. And from this personal experience grew a whole field of psychology that he invented called free trait theory. And this is the idea that all of us have our core passions, work that we love and people that we love. And in the service of these core passions, we have to sometimes act out of character. And it's uncomfortable to do that, but that's okay if we're acting out of character in the service of things that really matter. But it's only okay if we then take what Professor Little calls restorative niches, which are the places we go or the things that we do to bring us back into character. If you have a day full of pitch meetings, you want to also schedule a solitude meeting with yourself, and that's going to be your restorative niche. No matter what life you are living, every life calls for you to act out of character some of the time, and it's only okay to do that if you feel entitled to come back and be yourself.
That video really spoke to me, because I'm sure sometimes we really feel out of character when we go to these networking events, right? We're really stepping out of our comfort zone. What I like about it is it really just focuses on giving that time for yourself to find that restorative niche and really recharge. So make sure you really prioritize that as well. And so in closing, basically, I hope all of you got from this was knowing yourself and knowing what works best for you. Your pitch will change depending on your experiences and all the new experiences you'll be gaining. Practice, practice, practice. I think the only way you can be more comfortable in these situations is to practice. Luckily, the Career Center has so many different ways to provide this for you. You can even schedule an individual mock interview with one of our career advisors, and we can practice with you. And then I really like the make time for your restorative niches, as we just saw, and then be yourself. Like I said, there are a lot of strengths that each of you bring, whether extrovert, introvert, definitely hone in on those strengths and use that to your advantage. This is just an overview of our events coming up. Again, you can find this on our website. I know I mentioned some of these throughout the workshop, but feel free to attend. And then I'm going to close. I know I've been giving you mini challenges, so I'm going to ask you all to choose one. I'm going to make you accountable here today. Feel free to use the tools, the annotation tools, and there's a little stamp option. What are you planning to do to really challenge yourself? Are you going to practice your elevator pitch in front of the mirror, attend our career fair next week, make an appointment with one of our career advisors? You can do that on Connect SC. Reach out to one new potential contact, attend a Trojan talk, but not just attend, ask a question, or join the Trojan network. Or maybe you're going to do it all. So with that, I want to thank everyone. We are in Student Union 110. You can always go to our website for additional resources. And then I will hang out for a little bit. I know we had a few questions that I was not able to answer, but I will be around in case any of you have anything. I will follow up with a recording to those who participated and send the Zoom listing to you all. And we also typically post our recorded videos on the Career Center YouTube page. So feel free to visit the YouTube page and you'll see that soon on there. Thank you, everyone.